Things always go wrong when you don't want them to or need them to. For instance, right after I had shoulder surgery, our oven of 12 plus years decided to burn one of the filaments, and so we need to replace it. And I only have one hand, and usually it takes two hands to do this type of work. So it's not really complicated to do. Sometimes when you burn filaments, people just junk the stove and they go and they buy a whole new stove. It just takes a little bit of research. So all you need to do is find the model number of the stove and go online, research that model number, and see if it's either the baking filament, which is the bottom filament, or the broiler filament, which is the top one. And then you can get it from like applianceparts.com or even Amazon if you have the right number. It was better back in the day when they put full parts lists on the manuals or on this wiring schematic on the back of appliances. However, we're all too stupid now to have wiring schematics on the back of our appliances, and nobody keeps their manuals. So typically that's not available. Or maybe you never had the manual. Maybe you bought the stove used, or you bought the house with the stove in it. So let me show you the steps I'm going to take with one arm to go ahead and replace this. Anybody can do it, and this should prove it. So the only tools that you need for this replacement literally are a 1/4 inch driver. Now yours might be 5/16, it may be metric depending on where you are, but for my GE stove it's a 1/4 inch driver because there's two small 1/4 inch screws in there. Now also I've got a set of needle nose because there are some spade clips that hold the two wires on. Now this stove is at least 12 years old, so I don't know how sticky those are going to be as far as oxidation, that sort of thing. So these make it easier to pull those spades off. The next tool you need is a helper with two hands. For this particular job, I have my wife assisting me. As a note of safety, make sure that you unplug the stove. Not just throw the breaker, but unplug the stove before you do any of this work. So when I say the filament failed, that's what I'm talking about. That section missing right there. My wife turned on the stove to start dinner, and that whole thing just arced and started melting. Now I've seen the entire thing melt, like a jaw stick or an incense stick, but thankfully this one it was a little bit, so it's not that bad. However, if you notice, like our stove isn't this dirty, but all of the smoke that let off, I mean, we're gonna have to, after we take this out, we're gonna have to clean the stove a lot. When I talk about the two 1/4 inch screws, those are them right there. So what she's gonna do is reach in and undo those two screws with a nut driver. Now sometimes you can do it with a Phillips head screwdriver, but this particular GE, they're just 1/4 inch nuts with no slot or cross for a screwdriver. So I just want to show more of this, so the gap here that burned, but also you can see when I say sometimes that the whole filament burns, well, you can see here it just started twisting around. Now if you were to take like a tack hammer, a little hammer, and chip at this, all of this is burned. So when it arced, it just started going around. So sometimes wires are too short, so what you're going to have to do is actually move the oven, and you're going to have to take this entire back piece off to be able to feed the wires to your helpful and beautiful assistant. So on the back side, what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you put these spades back in, that there's no major rust or corrosion or anything, and that it's not touching the body of the stove. That would be bad. You'd have an arc event. And then it's not so far out that it'll hit this cover. Now the cover's humped, so it shouldn't, but just make sure it's not sticking all the way. But it's super easy. You just put them on just like that, and just like that, without the need for the needle nose to put them in. And now when you first turn the oven on, it's going to smoke just a little bit, but that's the element burning off some of the residual oil. And so that is how you change the baking element in a stove with just one hand.